Council. Welcome to my fellow councillors, my CEO and council officers, and all of you out there watching, and indeed everyone here in the chamber today. I'll call on each councillor and ask them to confirm verbally that they can see all councillors and hear the proceedings. Councillor Holcomb.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I can hear the proceedings and see all councillors and council officers.
Thank you. Councillor Tehan.
Yeah, I can see all councillors and council officers. And hear them too.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
And Councillor Webb.
I can hear all the proceedings and see all councillors and council officers. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
And I can see everyone and hear everything as well. So I'll ask each person to confirm by raising their hand that they could hear each other. Thanks very much. The apologies, Madam CEO.
Yes, we have an apology from Councillor Sladden today.
Thank you. The statement of commitment I'll read out. As councillors of Mansfield Shire, we are committed to ensuring our behaviour meets the standards met by the Mansfield Shire Councillor Code of Conduct and Councillor Charter. We will, at all times, faithfully represent and uphold the trust placed in us by the community. I'll ask each councillor to confirm their commitment. Councillor Holcomb.
I confirm my commitment, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Tehan.
I confirm my commitment.
Councillor Webb.
I confirm my commitment.
And I confirm my commitment. Item 5, acknowledgement of country to the Deputy Mayor. Thanks, Councillor Holcomb.
Mayor, our meeting is being held on the traditional lands of the Tungurung people. We wish to acknowledge them as the traditional custodians and pay our respects to their elders, past and present. We extend that respect to all members of our community.
Thanks very much. Item 6, disclosure of conflicts of interest. I'll call on each person to disclose any conflict of interest. Councillor Holcomb.
No conflicts, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Tehan.
I have no conflicts in relation to today's agenda.
Thank you. And Councillor Webb.
No conflicts in relation to today's agenda. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. And I have no conflicts in relation to today's agenda either. Confirmation of minutes, item 7. There's a recommendation before us. Councillor Tehan.
Yeah, I'll move that the minutes of the Mansfield Shire Council meeting held on the 20th of August 2024 be confirmed as an accurate record.
Thank you. Councillor Holcomb, second. Councillors, all those in favour of that recommendation? That's passed. Item 8, representations. We will have 2 representations today for item 13.2.3. Mr. Nick Malkin and Ms. Glenda Didier. Notices of motion nil. Item 10, the Mayor's report. Councillors, have you got any questions for the Mayor? I'd like to say something to community. I totally forgot to put in my report that I went to the Friends of Library first birthday party, and I sincerely apologise for that because it was a really good cup of tea and I bought a couple of books off them. So sorry about that, Friends of Library. There's a recommendation before us, councillors. Councillor Tehan.
Yeah, the council received the Mayor's report for the period.
Thank you. Seconder, Councillor Holcomb. All those in favour of the motion? Motion is passed. Item 11, the reports from council appointed representatives. The Australia Day Committee has not met. The Mansfield Shire CEO Employment Matters Committee met on the 19th of August and the 6th of September, and we are bringing that report to council on agenda item 18.1. The Goulburn Murray Climate Alliance, Councillor Webb.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Mayor. We did meet. A couple of key points we discussed during the meeting. The GMCA Sustainable Subdivision Program has been further funded. This was a pilot program to add a shared resource for all member councils to draw upon when assessing the sustainability into developments. It's exciting to see that it has been refunded. Round one of the business renewables buyers group was extremely successful. They had a really strong uptake of around businesses with around 50 megawatt hours. This is a bulk power buy for local businesses that use a large amount of energy. So in an effort to decarbonise their power supply and also get a discount. So that's across the northeast, and round two for that will commence in the coming months. We haven't got a date yet. GMC advocated directly. We met with Minister Kilkenny for planning. We made a submission to the federal public hearing for electrical vehicles, and we spoke with the MAV chair and leadership. And we are joining the Renew Australia for All campaign, which is a movement to advocate for low-income households and electrification principles. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Webb. The Hume Regional Local Government Network has not met. The Shire Council Audit and Risk Committee met yesterday on the 16th of September. I'll let Councillor Holcomb give us an update.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Yesterday's meeting covered a number of finalisation of financial statements which had to be approved by the committee. So the financial statements for 23-24, the performance statements for 23-24, the governance and management checklist for 23-24, and the business continuity plan for 23-24 were also tabled and presented and accepted. The numbers look good for 23-24 and certainly continue the trend of this council of being financially responsible and puts us in a pretty strong position going forward, particularly to do some of the things that we want to do. So that's really pleasing. The other thing that is pleasing, and there's an agenda item for this, Peter Johnson, who's the chairman of that committee, he is standing for another 3-year term, which is fantastic news for us. It gives us continuity, experience, and a very level head. So that's great news that's in this agenda for council's ratification. I'd like to acknowledge the work of Kirsten's team, particularly the financial management team. There's a heck of a lot of information in that. It's something like 200 pages of financial, and it's not terribly exciting reading, but the numbers make it really interesting. So, and they did a heck of a job to get it together in the time frame that they've done. It was a real effort. So, on behalf of that finance committee, I'd like to acknowledge that. So well done. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Holcomb. The MAV, Municipal Association of Victoria, had the annual conference last Thursday, the 12th of September. The CEO and I attended, but I'll let the CEO do a brief summary of that, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Look, some really interesting presentations, particularly on community and listening to community, which is something that this council, I think, is probably leading the way in. But it's always interesting to hear some other ideas from other presenters. So also received a copy of a strategic planning document that was circulated by one of the presenters at the conference, which the executive will have a look at and see what ideas we can take out of that.
Thanks.
That was probably the highlight.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, absolutely. And the rural councils of Victoria, myself and Councillor Team were apologies for that, but you attended that as well.
Yeah, fairly straightforward meeting, just acceptance of their financial statements for the year. Also a good presentation from the CEO of Agriculture Victoria. Lots of questions for her, and she's also offered to do some meetings in the regions, which was very well received by all the attendees there. So we look forward to organising something in the northeast.
Great. Thanks for that. So we have a recommendation before us, councillors. Councillor Webb.
The council note the verbal reports provided by councillors in relation to their representation on external committees.
Thank you. Seconder, councillor Hocken. And all those in favour of that recommendation of the motion? Motion is passed. Item 12, public question time. I believe there's no questions today. Item 13 is 13.1 is the Chief Officer's report for the month. Councillors, have you got any questions on the report? Councillor Holden.
Couple of questions. It's on page 20 of the report. It's to do with the landfill diversion rate. There's two numbers there. One's 26.18% for the full year, and then another one on the table is 37%. There just needs to be a clarification which is the correct number.
Let me just check.
It can be done later.
Yeah,
Just
no,
start.
I mean, that number was actually, the correct number is the 37%. It should have been 36% in the table, so I'm
Yeah,
not
the
sure.
table's right, but it's just above the table, so it's confusing in terms of what it is.
Sorry, that is a typographic error. The
Okay.
26% was calculated without the FOGO division in it. And that's why that number is lower, because it only includes the recycling. It should have included the FOGO division as
Okay.
well.
Right.
So apologies for that,
Because the
but
number's
not-
pretty good.
better describing that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll get that fixed or clarified for next month, because that was recycling only.
And just another thing with respect to, it's not necessarily stated in the report, but just my own clarification. With the number of voters for the election coming up being now finalised, to vote in this election, is it ratepayers voting only? Or is it residents as well? Well, how does that work?
You had to register by the cutoff date of 7th of August. We did a big campaign to try and make sure that people were aware of that cutoff date, and that's due to the state legislation having changed. So if you were already on the state government voters roll and you're a resident or ratepayer of Mansfield Shire, you were automatically registered. But if you say, for instance, were a non-resident ratepayer, you had to register by the 7th of August. And there were also some fairly specific requirements for things like business registration. So there was a change this time around, and it did remove quite a number of voters from the roll that had previously been on our roll. We worked hard to try and get them back there, but yeah, unfortunately, I think it ended up with about 3,000 odd that were removed.
Yeah,
Mm.
it's a big number. So just locally, enabled to vote, ratepayers and residents, or only ratepayers?
It should be both.
Should be both.
I'll just check with my governance officer to make sure that I don't have that incorrect, but I think it's both.
Yeah, it's definitely both.
Yeah,
Just vote.
yeah.
But not for ratepayers, sorry, not ratepayers, just residents. They have to be on the state roll. They couldn't apply.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so then, is that the same for candidates? Do they have to be,
Yes, yes,
ratepayer?
yes. No, you had to be on the roll
Not the,
and a citizen also. Is that right?
You have to be on the
Yeah,
roll. If
yeah.
you're not a ratepayer, then you have to be a citizen to be able to enroll in Australia.
okay,
Yeah.
so you can be, yeah,
But a non-citizen, if you're a ratepayer, then you can apply through us and you can be enrolled.
a non-citizen and a ratepayer, okay.
Mm.
Right, so you can be either a citizen or a ratepayer or both.
Tricky.
Tricky. Okay, clarify, so thank you.
Oh, yeah, I just had one comment in relation, but what Councillor Holcomb touched on in relation to the FOGO service. So I noticed that we've drawn on an extra 10 tonne in a month, which is really good. So people are responding to the facility that's been set up, and Just for clarification, I was asked a couple of times on the weekend about why council aren't supplying the bags for the FOGO bins. And I was told by a good source that we aren't issuing the bags because if they're tied up, then that FOGO can't be classified as FOGO and has to be general rubbish. So that was just, I don't know, a couple of those people were going to be watching for that response.
Yeah.
So
Sort of, it's
sort of, okay, well,
sort of.
more explanation.
Through
there,
you, Mr. Mayor. There is some concerns. It has to be a compostable bag, but the preference is not to use the bags because the knots apparently can be an issue in terms of the processing. So that's one reason why Sustainability Victoria are recommending against using the bags.
Okay.
Because there have been some issues with processing bags when they're tied in the knots. Yeah.
Right.
So best practice is not to use them.
Mm. Thank you.
Any other questions, councillors? In that case, there's a recommendation. Councillor Holcomb.
The council received a note that CEO's report for the period 1st of August 2024 to 31st of August 2024.
Thank you. I have a proposer, a seconder. Councillor Toon. Put the motion to a vote. All those in favour? And motion's carried. Item 13.2.1. Friends of the Great Victorian Rail Trail Memorandum of Understanding. Our responsible officer is Mr. Gareth McDonald, and the purpose of this item is to seek council endorsement for the proposed memorandum MOU between Mansfield Shire Council and the Friends of the Rail Trail for the 2024 to 2028 period. So councillors, welcome Gareth into the chamber. Have you got any questions for Mr. McDonald?
Yeah, just
Councillor Webb.
oh, sorry.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just one. Is this a revision or is this the first MOU that's been in place with the Friends?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, this is the first time that there has been an MOU proposed for the Friends and Council.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Councillor Holcomb.
But that was part of my question as well. But so that being the case, what are the benefits of the MOU to both the rail trail group and also council by having an MOU?
Yeah, so through you, Mr. Mayor, benefits are that it sets out clear guidelines of what sort of each party can do, what we expect from each other as well, in relation to maintenance projects, involvement of the group in sort of consultation for things on our section of the rail trail as well. And they do a lot of good work on there, so it's a bit of recognition as well to sort of thank them and also put it in as a bit of a permanent sort of fixture for their involvement.
So how many MOUs do we have like this in community groups?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'd probably have to direct that over that direction. I know of a few, but I'm not sure of a total figure.
You've got me there in terms of a number, but through you, Mr. Mayor, I think we certainly have ones with our outlying areas. I think the Friends of the Rail Trail would be, and the Friends of Venelale is probably the other one. Yeah.
It's not that many.
Not that many. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think there's a lot with community
Yeah.
groups as such, more sort of between organisations.
Mm.
And was this driven by the Friends of the Rail Trail group or driven by council?
Yeah, driven through you, Mr. Mayor, driven mainly by Ross, who's with us today, who's been working very hard on that, and we've been trying to get it through. So it's
Cool. Thank you. Thanks.
Any other questions, councillors? Well, page 11 was a recommendation. Councillor Tehan.
I'd like to move that council endorses the memorandum of understanding with the Friends of the Great Victorian Rail Trail 2024 2028 and authorises the Chief Executive Officer to execute the agreement.
Thank you. Did you have your hand up? Yeah, okay. And seconded by councillor Holcomb. Would anyone like to speak to the motion?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to congratulate the Friends of the Rail Trail for their support and their work around the rail trail. I think if it wasn't for them, it'd be all left up to council, and it would be a lot of work and a lot of cost to the ratepayers. So I think the group, which is doing a fantastic job, and you can see by the figures, the people that are using it, it's growing and growing in popularity, and that redevelopment of the station precinct will only help, I think, in getting more usage down there, and it's a great resource for the community and a great attraction. So well done to them, and congratulations to Gareth for drawing up the MOU.
Thanks, councillor Tan. Anyone else want to speak to the motion? Councillor Holcomb?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I'd like to endorse what Councillor Tan said. And Ross, congratulations to you and your group. The work you do is, as Councillor Tan said, is over and above, and really surprised me when I heard how much you actually do and what you actually contribute down there. It's fantastic. So well done. And this is recognition, I think, from and well and Gareth for putting it in place for the work that you do. And as well, it sounded there's not many groups that have an MOU with us, so it shows the importance that we place on the relationship. So thank you.
Any other speaking for motion? Anyone want to speak against the motion? All right, I'll put the motion to a vote. All those in favour of the motion? The motion is carried. Thank you. Well done, Ross. Yeah. Gareth. Item 13.2.2 is the sustainable tourism plan, and our responsible officer is Miss Ig Atunga.
Good job.
Thank you. I'm not saying it again. Councillor, you got any questions?
Just a pedantic.
Oh, sorry, I've got Councillor Webb. I've just looked at the screen. Councillor Webb.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. And through you, Mr. Mayor, to Olivia. I notice, and we've spoken about this previously, just in terms of the plan, measuring the targets and the goals, and I guess the progress of the plan. Can you talk me through, I guess, how we're going to be setting that and what the next steps are, please?
Yeah, absolutely. For you, Mr. Mayor. So part of the plan obviously recognised preserving the unique identity of the Shire and preserving that quality of life for our community. One of the initiatives was to create the Destination Management Action Plan with the wider industry, and that will be where we capture those specific actions, strategic objectives and initiatives to really sustainably develop our tourism industry. And that's the work that we're still continuing with, and had a fantastic workshop last week with the wider industry.
Okay, and I guess taking a step back then, this plan is to more about set the scene and a general direction for council, and then further work will happen to actually the things we're actually going to do to achieve some of these things. Is that right?
Yep, for you, Mr. Mayor, that's absolutely correct, and it shows where council's focusing on our key areas and what our responsibilities are, and then how we will work with other stakeholders across the industry, in line with the Sustainable Tourism Plan.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that.
Thanks, Councillor Holcomb.
No, the question's been answered.
Oh, questions answered. Yep. Any other questions? I've got a question. Why did you leave out Enoch's Point?
What's that?
On the plan, on the plan, and you've got all the outlying communities, and there's one called Enoch's Point.
Oh,
No one knows about it. It's worthwhile looking at it.
I'll take
in
that on.
future.
Have a look.
Yeah. I had someone the other day mention it to me.
Yes.
You know, we've got to remember Enoch's Point.
Okay.
But well done on your work, Olivia. Councillors, we have a recommendation before us. On page 14. Councillor Holcomb.
The recommendation the council endorse the Sustainable Tourism Plan 24-28.
Thank you. Have I got a seconder for that? Councillor Webb. Does anyone want to speak to the motion? Councillor Webb.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. This has been a really long time coming, this plan. I think we're at a point now where failure not to act on our fantastic opportunity that is our tourism industry would be a really grave mistake. I think this is a good start. I'm excited to see the further work that's going to come with it, including setting some pretty aspirational targets, working with a number of different stakeholders, including our fantastic tourism operators and other industries like Tourism Northeast, who can also do a lot more than what they're doing currently to help us. It really is a huge opportunity for Mansfield. We have an enormous resource of these tourism visitors coming to Mansfield, and it really is up to us now to paint our future with it. So I'm very much in favour of this motion. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Anyone else want to speak to the motion?
Yeah, I'd just like to say it was really encouraging to see so many people at the tourism workshop at the Mansfield Hotel last week. And obviously we can draw up plans like this, but it's only going to work if the community get involved. So there's real enthusiasm there and a lot of great ideas that came out of it. So well done for organising that, and it's a good step forward. So get people behind it and get it moving.
Yeah, thank you.
Nothing more I can add.
Yeah, okay. Well, the motion's been put, and all those in favour of the motion? The motion is carried. Thank you, Ms. Olivia. Thanks. Item 13.2.3 is Lot 3 Soldiers Road, Bar White. The responsible officer is Ms. Nicole Embling, and the purpose of this report is to seek council's determination for the application lodged for in the use of development of land for stone extraction at Lot 3 Soldiers Road, Bar White. It's been referred to council for determination as the number of outstanding objections exceeds the delegation. So we do have a delegation on this, and we've got somebody online, I believe. Is that right? Well, we might put Glenda first to make things easier for us in the council chambers. Thanks. Good morning, Glenda. My name's Steve Raby. I'm the mayor. And you've registered for a deputation this morning on Soldiers Road.
Yes.
The rules are you have 3 minutes for your delegation, and councillors may ask you questions after that.
Thank you. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, loud and clear.
Do the councillors have a copy of the previous objection that was sent through?
We have a copy of all objections. We have a very big file on this agenda item.
Okay, so Let me just start. Sorry, I'll just get back to where I am. Okay, so I'll just go back through where we're coming from and just outline a couple of points.
Yeah, well, you've got 3 minutes.
Okay, so
Yeah.
the site, obviously, of the proposed quarry is set in a farming community, and predominantly has agricultural purposes. It also has two very significant landscape overlays, which need to be adhered to, and the application, if it goes through, is totally in contradiction to the council's land and biodiversity environment statement, which says your plan is to uphold diverse and self-sustaining landscapes to support a healthy ecosystem. Well, I don't think a quarry fits that. There's no current license from the applicant to actually run the quarry, yet it's been running for over a year. Obviously, all of the files state all of the amenity issues, etc. The noise, the dust, the road, I could go on, there's about 15 of them, the biosecurity, etc. In their application, there were two rather large discrepancies. One was to say that stage one, which has been illegally completed, was to have the regeneration of that area completed by the 28th of November last year, and that hasn't occurred. And the applicant in their Microsoft project chart said that it would be completed by the year 2033, which is a 10-year program, not a 5, which they were originally talking about. I think also that if this proposal is agreed to, then it's going to cause a precedent in the area, and I think you'll probably find that many adjoining neighbours, etc., will in fact take up the option of making the whole of Soldiers Road just known as Quarry Road. I think that also, if the council is going to be putting overlays, etc., on parcels of land, then there's a responsibility to uphold that duty and commitment to the protection of the land. And I think that by granting a planning permit to allow this is making somewhat of a mockery of those overlays. They were put there obviously for a reason, and if they're going to be ignored, then basically the whole process becomes fraudulent. So, either the council has overlays in place and a commitment to their diversity, biodiversity, environmental planning, or it doesn't. And my feeling is that, there are plenty of other opportunities in plenty of other places for a quarry to be carried out, quarrying work to be carried out. And this is a farming community. And at what point do you say enough's enough? I basically think it's pretty inappropriate, and I just hope council takes on and understands, all of the 15 or so points that have been made in the various objections. And yes, the applicant might comply with, the Department of Energy and Environment, but at the end of the day, you've got to add some sort of reasonable and moral regard for the people that are in the area. That's about.
Yeah, have you finished? Because they're over 3 minutes.
Yep, sure.
Yeah. Thanks for that. Councillors, have you got any questions? Councillor Holcomb.
Glenda, thanks for that presentation. Just where do you live on that road? I'm trying to place you on our maps that we've got here.
We were purchasing 146 Soldiers Road, and it has fallen over due to the existence of the quarry.
146, right.
So we were purchasing it, we put a deposit down, we've lost the deposit, and finance would not allow it to occur with the presence of a quarry proposed for the area. They felt that it would devalue the property value. So we have in fact lost the deposit and not in a position to pursue the purchase any longer.
Right, thank you.
Can you just
Yeah.
just elaborate
Yes.
on that a bit more? Sorry. So you paid a deposit and signed a contract to purchase the property,
Mhm.
but then the bank heard about a quarry application, so they disallowed your loan.
No, not quite so simple. We were in a position where so we paid the deposit, and then we learned pretty much within a month or so that this quarry had been functioning, and it was going to then go to a full council approval. And we made a decision, and we discussed it with our finance people, and they felt that the property would be devalued from the value of what we made the offer on it, and we felt that that was not appropriate to move forward.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Any other questions? So I have a question. You said in your delegation to us, that deputation to us, that this would set a precedent.
Mhm.
Did you know that there were rock extraction happening down at the end of Soldiers Lane for the
Yes,
last 5 or 6, 7, 8 years?
yes, we became aware of that obviously after doing some research into the area, and I believe the neighbour adjacent to the proposed quarry has indicated that perhaps that they would also then take up further quarrying works. I don't know how relevant that is, but that was a discussion that was mentioned after the last council meeting.
Yeah. And so were you using Kate McDougall for your purchase of your property?
Yes, we were.
Yeah, because I see here she's also she's written a complaint. Thanks very much, Glenda. Has
okay.
anyone else got any questions? Yeah, Councillor Holcomb.
You may raise 2 points, one about rehabilitation and one about, I think, you're operating without a permit.
Mhm.
You said that the applicant has been operating without a permit there in the past.
Yes.
Can I just get from our planning people, is that the case that we know?
So through you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah.
When council became aware of the works happening without the required planning permits, they were issued with a cease use and cease works, which also leads to why the rehabilitation of those illegal works has not been undertaken yet. I understand that when the operations plan was first drafted, it was the applicant's intention to rehabilitate it as soon as possible, but because they've been directed with the cease use and cease works, they weren't able to undertake those rehabilitation works until this application is approved with a planning permit and the relevant approvals through the state government. And so they have not operated since that notice was directed.
But they were operating without a permit previously.
Yes, correct.
And they started, reading the notes, they started extraction in 2014. When was that with a permit or without a permit?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, we've got 2 effective timeframes to look at. Most recently, there was some illegal works done before the cease use was directed. Prior to that, many years ago, starting around the 2014 timeframe, council actually issued a letter which has been provided to you in previous correspondence confirming that a planning permit was not needed for some stone extraction works on this subject land, up to the extent of 1 hectare, and there was a depth that they were allowed to do for use of that stone on the subject land for erosion management and other type activities. So we do have record of those works being done legally that did not require a planning permit at the time. Due to some change in legislation and the increase in the amount of extractive activities that they want to do on this land, they now require a permit.
And getting back to Glenda's comments about the rehabilitation, was the owner meant to do the rehabilitation of that land in the past?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, the land that was legally extracted has been rehabilitated to a suitable level. What has not yet been rehabilitated was what was done illegally without any permissions. And they're effectively waiting for a determination on this before they can start those rehabilitation works.
That wasn't done.
No, at council's direction, they stopped works.
Yeah, and they had,
Sorry, may I say something?
Well, no, you can't. Sorry,
Okay,
because
there's just
I'm sorry about that, Glenda. There's strict rules on how we govern the meeting. And so there's no questions. You've done your delegation. We're asking questions for you, and you can't come back in, unfortunately.
Okay, because there's just a discrepancy with those dates that you've just been discussing.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry. This is a time, Glenda, that we take very, very seriously, and there are governance rules, and I'm the chair of the meeting, so I'm sorry I can't let you go outside of those governance rules, unfortunately.
So through you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
If what you've just been discussing is incorrect, how do I point that out to you?
Well, you've done it. You do a delegation, and you've got 3 minutes to do the delegation.
This is just.
I'm not sorry. I'm going to shut this down now, Glenda, because this is not how we run the meeting.
Okay.
Okay, so can you go back into the waiting room, please? Thank you. And I'll apply the same rules, Glenda, as to the other side as well. It's not just you, it's everybody.
That's fine.
Yeah.
But you.
Yeah. Good. Okay. Right. Where were we? You were asking.
We have another deputation, I believe.
Yes, we do.
Yep.
Yeah. So have you finished your questions, Mark? Yeah.
There was, sorry, sorry, you
Oh,
meant to
yeah.
there was an answer that was halfway through there
Yeah.
in relation to rehabilitation.
The rehabilitation.
Rehabilitation of the land.
Certainly. So we were going through that the works that were done legally that did not require a planning permit back around the 2014 date, which I was just checking the officer report, was 2014, has been rehabilitated. There's a old aerial imagery in the officer report that shows where those works were occurring. That has all been rehabilitated. On page 22 of the agenda, you can see the staging plan that is proposed, which includes the currently extracted area around stage 1. That has not yet been rehabilitated because of council's cease works direction that was ordered. They have not undertaken any further extractive works or rehabilitation works on the land. If this permit is issued, that rehabilitation is included in the operations plan and would be required to be done on stage 1 before they could commence on stage 2.
Councillor Holcomb, is it?
yeah, sort of. Yep.
Okay.
I understand what Nicole's saying.
Yep. Councillor Webb.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Just sort of further to that discussion, in the event that council does not issue a decision to, or issues a decision not to issue a permit, in terms of rehabilitation, what can be done or needs to be done on the site in that event?
Certainly, through you, Mr. Mayor. There are a number of options. If this application is not supported, it will get directed back to our compliance team, and they would work through the requirements that need to be undertaken to the illegal works to make that land suitable for agricultural use to continue, but also to ensure there is no risk of erosion or sediment runoff into any waterways nearby, or any impact to adjoining lands. That would happen through the compliance program though.
All right, well, I'll just leave it there because we do have another delegation and I think we might have gone on a bit further than we should have. So, delegation from Mr. Nick Malkin, who is the planning.
I'm a mining engineer and
Welcome, Nick.
yeah, thank you.
Thanks very much for coming in.
Thanks for having me. Yep,
You do a delegation 3 minutes.
sure.
You can't ask us questions and engage us in any discussion other than questions that we give you. And if you state your name,
Yep.
and who you represent, and then go through it.
Sure. Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity, Mayor, councillors and council officers to speak. On behalf of the owner, Mr. Friday, yeah, my name's Nick Malkin. I'm a mining and civil engineer. I've got a engineering consultancy based in Bright. We provide services in the resource extraction field as well as civil engineering and throughout Victoria and southern New South Wales. So yeah, I've got a 20 to 30 years background in resource extraction, whether it's mining, quarries, rehabilitation, which is what I'd consider this particular project to be. And just going back to Glenda's submission there, there's Glenda placed a heavy emphasis on the word quarry. I'd just like to emphasise that it's not considered a quarry in terms of extraction projects. It's quarries are typically associated with mechanical breakage, blasting, benching. This is more of a land rehabilitation project. In fact, in the Alpine Shire, there's similar ones that have occurred and been approved in the past, which predominantly involve rock extraction, a different type of rock, but cleaning up paddocks, so to speak, to improve agricultural capability of the land. So I think that's the first thing I wanted to emphasise, that it's not going to take any of the characteristics of a traditional quarry. It's of a temporary nature. And at the end of the operation, the land's going to be significantly improved through the removal of that rock. As the recommendation from the council officers has shown, it's a permitted use as per the planning scheme. It's extremely low impact. It's temporary. As I just emphasised, it improves the agricultural capability of the land. The actual rock is quite sought after in the landscaping markets in Melbourne. It's used for landscaping, but also coastal erosion protection and for retaining structures. So it's quite unique. I don't know if everyone's seen that type of rock. It's predominant through this particular area. It's a mudstone, red mudstone, and through the geological characteristics and how it's been formed, it creates blocky structures, which are ideal for those particular uses. From a local perspective, a social perspective, it's going to provide employment for a fourth generation farming family in the area. It's also, the project is responding to market conditions, I suppose. I'm not fully familiar with cattle sales and so forth, but they go up and down, obviously. So this is I think a common sense response to diversify into other areas of land use, I suppose. So through the sale of the rock, it's going to provide that additional form of income, and that's also going to enable the landowners to continue to hold other land in the area and provide income for the rest of their family and for future generations. So overall, I think, yeah, from a land use perspective, it's a viable, sustainable and a common sense response to current conditions. And as I said before, it's extremely low impact of a temporary nature, and overall will provide a beneficial outcome to the community. So that's about it. Thank you very much for the opportunity to talk.
You're right on 3 minutes.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Okay. Did you want me to stay here for any questions?
Stay there, please, Nick, and you might have some questions from councillors.
Sure.
Councillor T.
Oh, yeah, my battery's getting low, Robbie.
Oh.
Thanks.
Oh, it's in the hand.
Well, it is. I'll do a question as well too, but was someone else wanting to ask before me?
I can, what you got?
Okay, just one question, just with the traffic that will generate down Soldiers Road. And in particular, there's one resident down there who is a permanent resident, and their house is probably, I'd say 50 to 70 metres from the road. Do you think that the provisions that you provide in the work plan is adequate to protect them from dust, given that they're on the south side of the road? And there's a lot of, we're talking about quite a few movements in your work plan. How do you respond to that?
Look, I think they are adequate. We've nominated dust suppression, and the truck movements. I think it's 5 to 7 a day.
14 movements.
14 movements. So yeah. For this particular class of road, that's considered relatively low. So, and in the case that there is excessive dust, then there's provisions in the proposal to limit that through the use of water trucks.
Okay, can you talk me through that, how that would happen? So, we have a long, dry, hot summers here in this environment.
Yep.
So how does that work in your experience in the past where you had these situations in terms of the dust suppression, etc.?
Yeah, typical. It's a visual trigger, I suppose, when dust is observed through the drivers, the manager of the site, then the decision's made to fill up the water trucks and suppress the dust through spraying it on the roads. That could also be triggered by communication coming from local landholders, or through local landholders expressing their concerns through council. Council officers might be able to assist with that. Is that something that Nicole is that a common thing for a response? I can't ask Nicole. No. Okay, sorry.
Yeah,
right.
And the question is probably in regards to the applicant's response, and how that would work. Because if you're reliant on, in a remote area like that, on council having to go and check it, it's not possible to do it. So
no.
Has there been provision, really, of water supply put there so that this can?
Yes, there's numerous.
Can happen.
There's numerous dams, and part of the operations plan does go into detail about how that would work with filling up trucks from the dams and then using that for dust suppression.
Right. Yep. Okay. Yep.
Yeah.
Councillors, questions?
Yep.
Councillor Holcomb.
You mentioned that there's a beneficial outcome to the community. Can you tell me what that beneficial outcome is? I don't quite follow that.
Local landholders and residents getting continual employment through the sale of the rock and being able to retain land, agricultural land.
The owner.
The owner.
Yeah, I'm not sure about. The communities are pretty broad.
Oh well, there's truck drivers, there's excavator operators. So yeah, look, it's the owner and his family plus the people that they would employ through the transport of the rock and the operation of the equipment.
My experience with the rock, I used to live on a road it had a rock extraction at the end of it.
Yeah,
it was a nightmare. The trucks were all from Melbourne. There's no local employees there. The grader operators were from Melbourne. They jump out of the truck, put it up. So there's no local owner. The farm got a benefit, no doubt. But in the meantime, the roads was only 4 movements a day. The road chopped up badly. The dust was terrible for all the residents living on it, and the noise.
Right.
So there's no. I couldn't. That's why I had trouble with the community benefit of this. It's I get it for the landowner, and I think you made the comment it's not a money making venture. I tend to think it probably is a money making venture. There's
a commercial aspect to it. Yeah, for sure.
Which is money making.
Yeah. And that the money that comes from that commercial enterprise is going to be used to retain another agricultural property, adjoining property, which the family currently holds, which they're may not be otherwise able to do if it didn't go ahead.
I'm sorry, I just want clarification on the community benefit. I really struggle on that one.
Look, I can't speak directly for the landholder who we will employ for the operation of the trucks and the excavation equipment. That particular case that you're referring to is a separate case. So whether that happens in this particular circumstance or not, I can't comment. But I would assume that, knowing Jim and his character, that he's going to be employing local people.
But certainly with all the rock operations I know around here, the rocks goes out of here to Melbourne, as you said. So we're building we're affecting our environment up here to make people's environment down in Melbourne yards a lot better with this rock.
Yeah.
They're all Melbourne trucks.
Oh, well, I guess it's similar to cattle trucks.
Well, not necessarily cattle
and-
truck, a lot of cattle trucks up here are from here.
Yeah, okay. They take beef to Melbourne and meat, so
Yeah, but I'm
people-
just sort of getting back to
Yeah.
the employment of locals, that's all.
Okay,
Employment of
sure.
communities.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
I've got a question for you, Nick. So on the back of Councillor Holcomb's question there.
Yep.
Councillor Holcomb's mentioning another quarry somewhere else where the trucks come up from Melbourne, the truck driver gets out, excavates the rock, puts it in the truck, and then he drives down to Melbourne again. Is that the type of operation that's running here, or is the operation running here to employ people in the excavator and look after the stone extraction site?
Yeah.
How does that operate? Because if it's just someone's coming up here and digging it up, putting it in their truck and going home, then how does that operation work with dust suppression?
Yeah.
You're not employing anyone.
Look, so to go into a bit more detail about what actually happens on site, the nature of the rock deposit is it's the rock sporadically placed and occurring throughout the landform. So you've got a full-time excavator operator which skims off top level of topsoil, stockpiles it, and then goes and extracts the rock. So they're on site all the time, and they put the different rock sizes into different stockpiles. When there's a need for the rock to go off site, then that's when a truck's called in. When there's an order, for instance, the truck comes in and gets loaded up by that particular excavator operator, and then heads off site. And in the cases of dust suppression, then if there was going to be a dusty day, dry and hot, then there'd be someone else obviously employed to operate the water truck.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the basics of it. It's really not a complicated exercise. As I said, as opposed to a traditional quarry, there's no blasting, there's no drilling, there's no benching or anything like that. It's really skimming off a layer of topsoil, picking out the rocks, putting them to their particular sizes, loading them, and then at the end of that particular stage, respreading the topsoil and grading it more or less to what the previous landform was. Yeah. There might be a metre or two difference in height, if that, but from what we've seen with the rocks in this particular location, they're generally within the top 2 metres of the landform, so it wouldn't go any deeper than that.
Okay.
Even though a code of practice, what this particular operation would be working under, does permit extraction to a depth of 5 metres, that wouldn't be happening in this particular case. It wouldn't be any more than 2 metres based on previous experience.
Yeah, thanks for that.
Okay.
Councillors, any more questions? In that case,
Just a couple.
Councillor Holcomb.
It's not. What it's done obviously is dropped property values. Am I correct in saying this around the district in that area already?
What has the
fact that there's extraction going to be there, the property values obviously dropped based on Glenda's comments.
I'm not familiar with the local property prices. I know across the state they've dropped pretty much everywhere, but
it's had a significant effect. This lady was going to buy a property for a certain, that's all fallen over. She's now pulled out. So the owner's lost on that.
Yeah.
So I think you made the comment that it'll enhance property values around. I can't see how that's the case.
I don't recall making that comment.
Sorry, I think you alluded to that. Couple of things. Does the applicant actually live on the road? On Salters Road?
I believe so.
Well,
61 Soldiers Road.
How much, I just want to understand the economics of all this. How much a load is it? So one load you've got going down to Melbourne with rock.
Yep.
What's the value of that load?
I'm not familiar with the value of it. Do you want to speak to that?
I'd rather not elaborate on that, not be rude, I'm saying that's the real business.
Would it vary? It varies.
It varies from truck to truck, size of the rock, it's all over the place, pretty much.
But there must be an average dollar per, just so we can understand the economics and.
Yeah, I'm not too sure. I haven't been involved with that part of the operation.
Don't know whether that's,
Well, I think it's relevant to some.
well,
We'll not say that wrong.
oh, right. Yeah, okay. So there. Questions?
Yes. So, one of the concerns I've got is just the, it gets back to Councillor Turn's comment, just the road movements. So there's 15, or 4, I think in the recommendation that there's 14 road movements, which for a year of 3,500 movements per annum, based on a 50-week operation. The wear and tear on those roads is something that us councils are going to have to come up with. How are you going to, why should council have to fund that wear and tear caused by a private operation? And can you tell me how that's going to be mitigated?
I think as part of the permit conditions, there'd be a contribution that'd come from the landholder.
Yeah. Do you think, I've got concerns about whether that covers that contribution covers 1,500 movements per annum in terms of dust roadwork. And I'm only basing this on my experience on living on one of these roads, which only had less than half of the number of movements that you're doing.
Well,
Actually, less than a third.
well, there's $8,800 annually that's going to be contributed to from the landowner. Plus, on top of that, there's going to be the dust suppression, which will serve to a certain degree to hold the roads together during times of hot and dry weather. So my personal opinion is that that's a reasonable contribution to be made by the landowner. The truck movements may not be that much as well. That's a maximum. And it could well be lower. So my personal opinion is that what's in the proposed permit conditions are adequate, and that there would be a significant, detrimental effect on the roads. Keeping in mind that roads are for this use as well; they are for economic benefit.
Yeah, but not necessarily for a commercial enterprise like this. This is quite different to any other usage that those roads are built for.
Does that have a question?
No, I'm just making a comment.
Okay. Got a question?
No.
Right. Councillors, any more questions for Mr. Maitland? In that case, thanks, Nick.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Maitland, for coming, and
Thanks, Nick.
welcome to sit down and
Yep. Thank you.
listen to the rest of it. Councillors, the responsible officer is Nicole Embling, and any questions for Nicole Embling? Yeah, the team.
Yep. Miss Embling, the first deputation was from Glenda, and she mentioned the SLOs and the fact that she thinks they were a bit of a waste of time having them, given that if this proposal is likely to get up, can you explain to the meeting how the these SLOs two in particular work, and why in this situation you've made a recommendation that they're not fully enacted, I guess, for want of a better word.
Certainly, through you, Mr. Mayor. Firstly, I'd probably like to direct you page 19 of the officer report. Figure 4 does include a screenshot of the significant landscape overlay, which applies to Mansfield's Alpine Approach region. So you can see the main thoroughfare through the middle of that road, through that overlay is the Mount Buller Road. The purpose of that overlay is to protect our Alpine Approach. So effectively, the direction that people go from Mansfield to Mount Buller and Mount Sterling, our Alpine region, the views in that region to and from the Alpine. The overlay was put in place to protect the area from visual amenity purposes, and that outlook that we have to the region, the mountain regions. When you look at how the landscape was applied, it does follow property boundaries. It doesn't necessarily follow the topography of the land, and the officer report and its attachments does detail how the majority of the subject land is actually on the lower side of the ridgeline and is not able to be seen from the Mount Buller Road and that main thoroughfare that is our Alpine Approach. Quite a detailed assessment has been done of this property from surrounding areas along Soldiers Road, Old Tolmy Road, Graves Road, and Mount Buller Road itself, Mount Buller Road as well. There is an attachment to this that shows some Google Earth imaging as to where you can and can't see the whole property as a from a distance. I guess what's really important is when we're looking at an application for stone extraction, noting that the works are temporary, that they are done into the land. It's not something being built on top of the land that would block views or impede those views to the Alpine region. When the assessment was done, it's become quite apparent that this land is not really visible at all from that Alpine Approach. You can't see it, this subject land, and therefore not considered that there would be that significant impact that we are trying to protect from development and things like that. The purpose of this overlay, this proposal is very limited in its impact in that sense. I do acknowledge that this development would be able to be seen from the north, so up towards the Tolmy region, and those properties obviously immediately north and northwest. They would be able to see this extraction happening. However, their views are over the property. This property is not on such a significant ridgeline or in a prominent location that it would impede views as such. Those views to the Alpine region from all of the surrounds would still be maintained. And there was a really detailed assessment included in that officer recommendation that effectively demonstrate that this proposal is low risk in terms of the significant landscape overlay, especially when we consider that it is temporary works that would be done within a number of years and in small sections of staging, and each stage would be completely rehabilitated before the next stage would commence. So at any given time, you're only looking at a maximum of 1 hectare of extractive area at a time. And at the end of stage 5, there would be no more on the land and it would be able to be completely returned to farming practices. Noting, I think calculation was that the proposal is for less than 5% of the land to be used for extraction.
Thanks for that explanation.
I've got a question on the back of councillor Teams. You mentioned that each stage is 1 hectare. Who regulates that? How do we know they're not going to do 2 or 3?
Certainly. Given the nature of these developments, stone extraction is not just regulated by council. So part of the process, first step is to get confirmation from the Earth Resources, which is a state department, determining that they are eligible to operate under the code of practice that Mr. Malcolm was referring to. They do require a planning permit from council for the use and development. If a planning permit is approved, their next stage is to go back to Earth Resources and get a work authority, which adds another layer of legislation to their operations plan. And so the responsibility for enforcing that operations plan and their work authority is not solely sit with council. There is quite legislative requirements that they are bound by if a work authority is issued. But we do still have capacity to undertake compliance action if necessary and do regular checks if needed. But obviously, if conditions that are enforced as such that's in the officer recommendation do require some ongoing check-ins with the developer effectively. One of the biggest ones is in relation to the monetary contribution for the road maintenance and things like that. So council would be involved on an ongoing space to not only be checking the road, but there'd be opportunity there to check on the property.
Yeah, thanks for that. That's a very good explanation. Councillor Webb.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. And through you, Mr. Mayor, just in regards to that contribution that was previously mentioned, the 8,800 for the maintenance of the road. How is that calculated, and do we think that will cover the additional wear and tear based on those truck movements for this planning permit, please?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So there were some calculations done in collaboration with our engineering department and field services crew, who are the ones on the ground doing the works and engaging contractors and understanding the costs of materials and things like that. This figure came about as a effective minimum amount that would be appropriate to contribute towards our regular grading program and ongoing maintenance of the road. It is noted that the condition does read that it would be a minimum amount agreed prior between council and the developer. So there would be some negotiations to be done beyond that 8,800 if council believed that there was reason for additional money to be spent on that road due to those truck movements. We're looking at 14 truck movements per day or 7 full loads at maximum. If the wear and tear of that road was greater than expected, council would have the opportunity to negotiate an additional monetary fund above the 8,800 in the condition, and that could be done on an annual basis.
Okay, that answered my follow-up question. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Councillor Webb. Councillor Holcomb.
Just taking that point a step further, Ms. Hamling, does that road maintenance include dust suppressant?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that particular condition doesn't relate to dust suppression. There is a recommended condition 9 specifically relating to dust that does require them to have a water truck available on days of wind in the drier seasons. But I'd probably more directly refer you back to the operations plan, which if this planning permit is approved, they'd be bound by that operations plan, which does significantly detail how they intend to operate that water truck and would be bound by that.
Yeah, dust suppressant that we put in other roads to stop dust. I think we use on Buttercup Road, remember? Just that.
Rifle-butts.
Road.
Yeah.
That would be more applicable, wouldn't it, than someone relying on a water cart to go down there?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I might refer to our general manager for that one. Thank you.
Sorry, yeah, thank
Sorry.
you. That's right. Through you, Mr. Mayor. The condition actually has the first option being water spraying on the road. The second part of that condition actually refers to other natural-based proprietary dust suppressions like what was used on Buttercup Road, and that is to the satisfaction of council. So the condition requires if a water cart's not cutting it and we're finding we're still getting dust complaints, we can use that condition to give direction that some other form of dust suppression has to be engaged to minimise those impacts. So the condition allows both, which allows some flexibility depending on the season and whether there is an issue or not an issue. So it does allow some flexibility, but it does allow council to give direction for the use of some other form of dust suppressant like what was used in Buttercup Road.
So how do we then, if I was at the house, it's right on the road there, and by the Neelys, if I was in that house, that'd be a nightmare for this dust. that we totally change it.
That a question.
The question is, how do we mitigate the circumstances for that particular family, who are a long-term family, who've been for generations? And all of a sudden their whole living is affected. How do we solve that problem for them?
Yeah, certainly. So through you, and I'm happy for Ms. Emily to add anything, but that is the reason we have these conditions. So there's a condition about the dust specifically, because that is a concern for that property that is the closest to the road in particular. The second one being about the condition about ongoing maintenance of the road, provision for ongoing maintenance of the road, is to make sure that their experience or their use of that road in the long term isn't undermined by the trucks that are going up and down the road. It is always a difficult one, because farming zone is the industrial zone as much as any other industrial zone, in terms of when we're dealing with a permit for stone extraction like this, we have the opportunity, I suppose, to put some conditions on how that road is used in relation to dust suppression and things like that. If this was a normal farming practice that was running farming trucks up, that was not requiring a permit, we wouldn't even have that opportunity. So in one way, we've got the opportunity to at least work to mitigate the impacts of what will be higher levels of traffic movement than they might otherwise experience. Keeping in mind that the extractions might be it's the maximum number of vehicle movements we're talking about. So it's a maximum of 7 trucks a day. It may not be 7 trucks a day. So there might be periods of time where they're using the road a lot less, and periods of time where they're using it as much as they can in the permit. And it is time limited in terms of they've only got a certain amount of stone that they can extract. So with every type of industry like this, there is ebbs and flows in terms of your traffic. So you need to have ebbs and flows in terms of how you manage that road and those dust impacts to work better for the community. But we're always happy, and our compliance team is always happy to work with anyone who might have any issues if they think that the permits aren't being complied with properly.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I might just add one small thing that I believe is relevant, is the hours of operation. So the recommended conditions do actually align with what was put forward by the applicant, being 7 a.m. till 4 p.m. Monday to Fridays only. They don't intend to operate on public holidays or weekends, which greatly increases the amenity for those residents, that there wouldn't be stone extraction trucks operating on weekends or outside of those hours, which are the normal hours in which people are usually at home. Thank you.
And public holidays, I see
Correct.
that was written in there as well. And days of total fire ban.
Yes, which is standard practice for these types of operations.
But there's still 3,500 truck movements per annum, which aren't on that road at the moment, based on picky works. It's a big increase in the usage of it. The other thing, just the capital, in driving up that road, there's certain areas of that road when you've got big trucks coming in, which are going to be dangerous. I think it's quite narrow in certain places. And again, I'm only going on the experience of living on the road where we had narrow areas which are quite dangerous. And also there's a couple of crests and line corners. So I think council has an obligation to address those, but council shouldn't have to pay for those. So have we looked at that, at what capital works have to be done up front if we go ahead with this? Sorry, is it, I don't know, Nicole or?
That's okay. Yeah, so through you, Mr. Mayor, in terms of any road that we have within the municipality, council has to try and do what we can to make them as safe and as trafficable as possible for people using those roads. When we look at a planning application, we have to look what the impact of that use will be on the road itself. If we already have an issue like you're talking about, where there's a narrow section of the road or a crest on the road that's already existing, we need a causal link that this development's created that problem to require this development to fix that problem. In this instance, if there's an issue there already, it's something we would need to have to consider in terms of a council's work on those roads. Keeping that in mind is nothing that happens on a road in terms of traffic undermines people's rights to drive to the conditions of the road. So if the road condition is such that you need to take a go of its or perhaps we need to look at some signage for those crests to use for warning of people and things like that. They're things that we can do as a council to ensure the safety of our communities on these roads if there is genuine concerns there.
Mr. Mayor, I might just add to that, perhaps the increase, given the significant increase in traffic that's proposed here, it's and with the significant increase in heavy vehicles, it may well be appropriate for council to do a safety audit along there. Yeah, I'll ask the general manager if one has already been done as part of this. So I think that is going to be a cost to council that is arising from, you know, the increase in traffic associated with this development.
Yeah, 3,500 movements is a massive change to what the current setup is. And I'm not sure that it should be paid for by council.
Councillor Team.
Yeah, I've got I was just a question for Miss Embling regarding the permit length and what would happen at the end of the permit's 5 years, last 5 years. What happens at the end if the applicant would like or hasn't finished the extraction works? What's the process then? Does it just stop and everything gets rehabilitated, or?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. The permit conditions that apply to stone extraction are quite different to what we experience in most development applications that you would have seen. The expiry requirements actually come directly out of the planning scheme and the relevant acts, and there is no set timeframe for completion. So you'll note, my head, I can't for what permit condition recommendation it is. Number 33 at the very end does say this permit will expire if the development is not started within 5 years of the date of a permit. That is a requirement of the Act. Councils are not actually able to put on end dates. However, under the Act, there is a set time frame that, sorry, I'm just trying to find it in the officer report. So on page 30 of the agenda, it does detail under the Planning Environment Act that, so in section 68, a permit for stone extraction expires if the use is discontinued for a period of 10 years. So they would have up to 5 years to commence. And while they are operating, they could continue operating up until they either completed all of the extraction that was allowed, or if they ceased for a period of 10 years, this permit would then expire. But these conditions are quite different to what we've seen on most normal planning permits for typical development of a dwelling or similar.
I'll say that. Yeah. And just another question in relation to the route that the rocks will be taken out of the district. I noticed that initially at some stage the route was planned to come out and down Malcolm Street onto Kidston Parade and out through Melbourne that way. But now we have the heavy vehicle bypass. Is that been enacted into this permit condition?
Yes, thank you through you, Mr. Mayor. So the operations plan does detail the whole route to go all the way down Mount Buller Road, Malcolm Street to Kidston Parade. You'll note recommended condition number 1 actually requires an amended haul route to follow the advisory truck route that was recently opened by council, which would require a right turn off Mount Buller Road down Greenvale Lane to follow the truck route to come back out at Withers Lane and enter onto Maroondah Highway that way. So that would be required to be shown in the operations plan before it would be endorsed by council and before they could start operating.
And so if those trucks did not take that route, that'd be a breach of the work plan, wouldn't it?
That is correct.
Yep.
I've got a question. So, reading in your report on the 17th of April of this year, there was a meeting with 3 council officers, the permit applicant, Mr. Friday, and 2 of the objectors. Is it normal if you've got 6 objectors, only 2 turn up? So am I to read that there's 4 objectors that just objected and don't care about going to the meeting? How does this work?
So we did have 2 come. I do believe at least 3 of the, how many do we have at the time? I had 7 at the time. So 3 of the 5 that did not come did contact me beforehand, and I have had lengthy discussions with all of the objectors during the course of this application. Given that we host these consultative meetings during business hours, they're not always accessible to people operating businesses, working, things like that. But there were items on that agenda for the consultative meeting that were discussed in relation to their specific objections, regardless of whether they were in the room or not. And it's definitely wouldn't be appropriate for me to say whether or not they care as such, but their objections were not any less significant.
Okay, so that leads me on to the next question. And the way I read your report is the applicant's been very conciliatory, because one of the objections, from 470 Soldiers Road, said that they wouldn't have wanted the extraction to work out of the hours from 7 to 5, and then the applicants made it 7 to 4. And then the way I read it is it true to say that has been a conciliatory, they've been conciliatory and looked at these objections and tried to work with the objectors? Yeah.
Very much so. So prior to that consultative meeting, the permit applicant and their consultant were provided with full copies of all of the objections. They did have a conversation with me about some things that they might be willing to alter to address some of the concerns. They were discussed at the consultative meeting. As you can see, coming out of that, they did slightly change the operating hours. The truck movements were more clearly defined as to how many full loads versus just truck movements coming and going. And as part of that, we did receive some agreements on that there would be a required monetary contribution towards the ongoing maintenance of Soldiers Road. So that consultative process with those objectors has resulted in some better outcomes for this proposal.
And another question, if you don't mind. So on the objection, concern and officer comments, page 26, you've mentioned that there was stone extraction there at 370. I think that's right, 370 Soldiers Road. But I know that there was also stone extraction at 470. So there's been 2 lots of stone extraction up the very, very eastern side of Soldiers Road for many, many years. Now, my question here is, has the law changed now to allow us more oversight on stone extraction than then? Because this has been happening for a long, long time down that road. So I suppose the question is, are we at a stage now where we can impose conditions to make it more bearable for the people living on the line?
So there's a few different elements at play to your questions. So to be clear, there was 370 Soldiers Road is down the very end of the road. They were operating under a planning permit that council issued that did have fairly similar conditions to what's in the officer recommendation. There was an inclusion of a contribution towards the upgrading and maintenance of Soldiers Road. There were some other certain elements of those permit conditions to address amenity and things like that as well. They have exhausted what was approved under that permit. So they have completed all of the approved extraction and have now ceased. And without any further permits or approvals on that land, they can no longer operate. There was a second one, and I'm not sure around the timing of the two approvals specifically, but there was a second one that didn't operate for very long. It came up in our consultative meeting, and the residents happened to know about that one. It's quite close to home for them, that where they had intended to do extraction on this other site, they actually didn't find much stone at all, and so they ceased quite quickly. In terms of timing and what legislation has changed, I would say, if anything, the requirements from the state government through the Earth Resources team is probably more legislated than it might have been back in the mid-2010s or such. And their ability to be more actively involved in these processes is a lot more. But it hasn't necessarily changed our requirements for what we expect of developers and through planning permits.
Okay, so the change has been Earth Resources, which is a state government.
Correct,
statutory body.
and those changes have come out of the Extractive Industries Act,
Yep.
which is not exactly what it's called, but
Yeah,
there has been changes to that legislation.
yeah, thanks, Ms. Inman. Councillors, any other questions in regard to this agenda item? Right, no more questions. There's a recommendation on page 31 to 33. Councillor Webb.
I propose to move the motion as written in today's agenda. Thanks, Mr. Mayor. 31 through to 33.
So 31 to 33 inclusive, is that correct?
Correct.
Right. Councillors, here's a motion put before us. A seconder to the motion. There's no seconder to that motion. That motion will lapse. Those, councillor Team.
No, I'm
Oh.
going to propose an
Yeah, okay.
alternative motion,
Yep.
Mr. Mayor, if I could, given
Yeah,
that
yeah.
one
No worries.
has lapsed, yep. So the motion that I'm proposing is very similar to the recommendation in the agenda, but with two changes. The one being point 10, which relates to the movements, and I'm proposing that the movements do not exceed 8 or 4 return trips per day. And under point 16, engineering, that the contribution amount agreed prior to payment and will be a minimum amount of $15,000 annually to the satisfaction of the responsible officer.
So your motion is the motion from 31 to 33 with changes in item 16 engineering, 15,000 and
Point 10.
and sorry, and
heavy
point,
vehicle
yeah,
movements.
and point 10 heavy vehicle movements 8. Well, that's
Yeah,
4 return
not
trips.
exceed 8 or 4 return
Yeah.
trips. Yep.
Yeah,
Per day.
Yeah, all right. I think I've got that written. There's an alternative motion put before councillors. I've got to second it to the motion.
I second the motion.
Councillor Holcomb. Seconds the motion. All right, motion has a proposer and a seconder, alternative motion. Would you like to speak to the motion, councillor?
Yep. Yeah, I would. Look, I think it's been a very good debate, and having spent a fair bit of time out there on Soldiers Road and just looking at the setup where the houses are in relation to the road, in particular, there's a couple of premises, one which is very close to the road, I think I feel that the amount of movements that was in the work plan was excessive, and if I put myself in living there, in that house, I think it would be it'd be very uncomfortable. So, but I think this is very manageable, and given that if the extraction might take longer, perhaps, although the work plan has said that generally there'd be only 3 to 4 movement loads going out per day. But given that there's no time frame on the end of this project, then it's not detrimental to it all being extracted. So I think for the benefit of the people who live on that road, that it'd be much more comfortable. I'd also like to just make a comment that I think, as given that, and the next point of the contribution that will be now increased from 8,800 to 15,000. I think that the Shire look at specific works in dust suppression in terms of, say, the polymer additive to gravel that can be put, say, 50 metres either side of those dwellings on the road, which would, and that in turn with the applicant's water cart that it will be available when needed. I think that will solve a lot of those issues of the objectors. Yeah, I think it's good. Well, not good, but it's good to see that, you know, the applicant is a farmer from the area, as he said, 4th generation, and we all know that it's very hard to purchase agricultural land in the Mansfield Shire. The prices of their hobby farmer prices. So it's good to see that this is a local applicant and that they are using this to able to continue their succession planning further down the track and to keep their business. And I know they have a substantial business in orchard business as well as grazing business. So I think that's it's much better to see that than someone coming in and just buying a block to do this work. And we're not really protected against that happening. So I think that's a really good thing to see. And just to mention again, it's good that the work plan will be the truck route haulage route will be protected because of it's in the work plan. So they will be able to use the facility to keep these trucks out of town, because as we know, that's what we've done for the last 4 years. We've worked hard to try and solve that issue of trucks thundering down Malcolm Street or High Street. So, yeah, it's probably all I've got to say.
Thanks, councillor team. Councillor Holcomb, you seconded the motion. Do you want to speak to it?
Yeah, I find this one of the most difficult projects to come to this council. If we as a council, one of the cornerstones of this council is that we would protect the rural sector at all costs. That is absolutely primary to everything we've done, whether it be on any other developments that are in place, various things that have happened on farms, rates, the whole lot. It's all been about protecting the rural sector and protecting the beauty of the land that surrounds this Shire and what makes it so attractive to live in. And here we have a quarry, gravel pit, rock extraction, whatever it is. We are going to get a lot of criticism for this, and it's a very difficult one for me to swallow in terms of supporting it. I support it because of the because really of what the officer's recommendation is. There's some compelling arguments in that. But I only supported it, and I agree with Councillor Team what he's done there with the amounts. But I support it on those basis, but I think it's a really, here we have farmers changing the nature of the land that we're trying to protect. It's almost, it's a very difficult one for me to get in mind, but I understand that the difficulties of going the other side as well. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, councillor Holcomb. Councillor Webb, do you want to speak to the motion or?
I'd like to speak against this motion if I can, please, Mr. Mayor.
Okay,
I do agree. Sorry, Mr. Mayor, go ahead.
yeah, go ahead. Speak against the motion.
Thank you. I do agree with Councillor Holcomb's points that this is a very difficult decision. The reason I'm speaking against this motion specifically, reducing the truck movements on the road will greatly increase the duration of the project, which I feel is going to have a much more negative impact on things like the land values and the quality of life than a shorter term project would. In terms of increasing the funding from the developer of this project, as we found out during our discussion earlier, that 8,800 amount was a minimum set, and we have provision there to gain more if necessary. I am always cautious about the increase of red tape for businesses to operate and governments potentially overtaxing operators when they do so. I feel the 8,800 with provision to negotiate more if required was more than sufficient. I think I feel it is overreach, but that is my point of view. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, right, thank you. Well, before I put this to a vote, I don't.
Can I have a right of reply to that?
Yeah,
What Councillor Webb said.
Yeah, you do have a right to reply, but you got him before me. I wanted to speak to the motion.
Okay, sorry, yeah,
And
right.
I don't
Yeah.
normally get to speak to a motion as mayor, so.
Yeah, but by all means, sorry, I didn't realise you were speaking.
No,
to the motion.
yeah,
I thought
yeah.
you were just.
And then I'll let
moving on
you
to a vote.
have.
Yeah, no, it's good.
Right, a reply.
Yeah.
Councillor Tehan. Look, I agree with both Councillor Tehan and Councillor Holcomb. I think this is a very difficult decision, but I think it's given that Mansfield has a product and there are other rock extractions in the district, and I know of another farm is doing rock extraction because his grandson, or they all want to go farming. And to buy farmland in Mansfield now is $15,000 an acre. So 100 acres is $1.5 million. I mean, if we want to protect our farmers and farming, sometimes we have to look left field in this. And so I support that. I think it's the best outcome for the people down the road. We've been very, very mindful of dust. I would like our council officers to speak to the applicant about speed of trucks, and I'm sure that they'll take that on board. So I think as an outcome, this is the best we're going to get. And with your amended motion, Councillor Tehan, you picked up those movements and the contribution towards our roads. We've always said, we're looking after our roads, and we've been very, very mindful of that over the last 4 years. So thanks very much, and you do get your right of reply as the moving of the motion. That's what's saying.
Yeah, thanks. And I probably should have reiterated a little bit more when I proposed the reduction in the number of movements per day for this application. But given the size of the quarry, and I've looked into exactly how long it takes to extract certain amounts of rock out of certain hectareages, and this, if they used these haulage rates, they could actually finish this in 3 years. There's no problems. There's no dragging it out way down the track. It's given the amount of area there is and the depth that they can go and the amount of rocks there, and also the figure for the contribution to the wear and tear on the road and maintenance was done by a formula of what it costs to resheet roads per square metre and I'm not sure whether Councillor Webb went out and had a look at the road out there or not, but I've looked at the road, I've looked at the length of the haulage out there from the site to the old Tommy Road, and it is a calculated cost where I come up with the $15,000. So yeah, it wasn't just pulling figures out of a hat.
Right, thanks very much, councillor T, and I'll now put that motion to a vote. All those in favour of the motion? And those against? Thank you. The vote is carried. That motion is carried. I might at this stage just call a 5-minute break to the meeting, if I may. We've been going we have been going 2 hours now. So if I can have a motion from the floor to have a 5-minute break.
Sure.
Councillor Team and a seconder. And I'll put that motion to a vote. Motion is carried. Thank you. See you in 5 minutes.
So, here we go. I just did,
So welcome back, everyone, from our 5-minute break. The next item of the agenda is 13.3.1. S6 instrument of delegation, council to members of staff, and the responsible officer is governance and risk officer, Chelsea Young, Ms. Young. Councillors, have you got any questions for Ms. Young? In that case, we have a recommendation for us. Councillor Webb.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Motion being that council revoke the existing Schedule 6 instrument of delegation from council to members of council staff previously endorsed by council on 21st of May 2024. 2, endorse the Schedule 6 instrument of delegation from council to members of council staff dated 17th of September 2024. 3, approves Mayor Councillor Steve Raby to sign and Deputy Mayor Councillor Mark Holcomb to witness the signing of Schedule 6 instrument of delegation from council to members of council staff. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Webb. Have I got a seconder? Councillor Holcomb. All those, does anyone want to speak to that motion? Against the motion? I'll put that motion to a vote. All those in favour? Motion is carried. Item 13.4.1 is the Sports and Recreation Facilities Review. The responsible officer is Community Networks and Wellbeing, Alex Neens. Coming. Hi, Nola, you're in instead of Alex Neens. That's good.
Yes.
Councillors, it's
just turn your camera.
welcome, Ms. Bales.
Thank you.
We're discussing, or we're going to, maybe, 13.4.1, the Sports and Recreation Facilities Review. Councillor, is there any questions? Councillor Holcomb.
Yeah, Ms. Bales, I was surprised at only 11 responses. I don't know why I'm surprised. I don't know. I just thought there would have been a lot more. But is that a good response to? I thought sport might have been generated a lot more interest.
Well, I think that the feedback was really from obviously people who had a specific interest in feeding back, and it is an updated strategy, so it's an existing strategy and then updated. So I suppose the updates were really about the rapid growth that had happened, and that's why it was seen as being required. And the feedback was obviously prompted in those people who wanted to comment on the changes, really. I'm sure there probably was a lot of feedback when the initial draft or the initial strategy was done.
So you weren't disappointed or anything with that number, or?
No. I think, we give the community opportunity to feedback. So it's always nice to get the feedback. We got some positive feedback as well. So I think it wasn't just necessarily from people who had something that they wanted to say, but I also think part of it is important that we set up the reference group, because we want to have ongoing dialogue. And I think having a platform that gives the stakeholders and the community a voice moving forward, especially when it comes time to do the new strategy, will be important.
Yeah.
Okay. The new strategy, is it going to look at, how do I say it's, it would be all encompassing, so it can be as big and broad as, so it's reasonably big thinking in terms of where we could go with sport.
Well,
Yeah.
I think certainly we've got some recommendations out of this update that's looking at what the future requirements will be. I think there's going to be opportunities for looking at partnerships moving forward. That's why I think it's really good if we get the reference group. We'll have a good feel for it leading into when the new strategy would come about, which is obviously 4 years' time. So I think we also want to be looking at what the community needs are on an ongoing basis, and especially if we got growth like we did in the previous 4 years, then those recommendations might need to be brought forward or changed, or there's more impetus to approach Sport and Rec Victoria with changes, and it can be a bit more responsive.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Pass, when do you envisage establishing the Sport and Recreation reference group?
Well, I think it would be certainly within the next 6 months we'd have it up and running.
Oh, yeah.
So I think whether obviously, you know, we're about to go into caretaker and then we'd be looking at engaging with stakeholders, and then we'd get into that end of year break when a lot of people are on holidays and things. So we'd certainly be looking for expressions of interest in setting up that group.
Sort of around about March-ish. Yeah. Okay, thanks. Any other questions, councillors? In that case.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry, councillor
Yeah,
T.
I do. Just in relation to the table on the strategy update, and the table on page 10, which details the facilities, the available facilities and the required facilities by 2028. So really this assessment is saying that we've got adequate facilities at the moment, and in most situations we'll have adequate facilities in another, 4 years' time.
Well, I think obviously,
Am I reading that correctly? Sorry, yeah.
So there's certain trigger points depending on the population growth that would need a new facility, and out of that table, the identified recommendations were about a new shared oval for AFL or cricket, and additional soccer pitch. So I think it's trying to, it might say that we might just have adequate at the end of the strategy, but I think we're trying to be more forward thinking than that.
Yeah.
And so be planning ahead. So and looking for those opportunities. And obviously it's dependent on the population growth, and we know how quickly that can change.
Yeah. So, but even if we experience 2.7% high growth rates, we're only going to not be adequate in terms of we're going to be 0.7 of an AFL oval short. Is that that's the way I'm reading that?
Yes,
that chart.
That's true. But at 0.7, you need a new oval.
Yeah, a bit hard to play on at 0.7.
And also, you know, we're trying to create a healthy and active community. We want people to be able to participate, and I suppose it's identifying land opportunities that we have to bring in those new facilities, and finding the funding to do it.
Did the AFL include the AFLW, AFL Women's is starting to be quite, it's a growth sport, and especially in Mansfield now. So did they look at that as well?
I can't tell you actually
Okay.
that this was commenced early in this year, and I think the AFLW only had their first season,
Yeah,
so I can't
Yeah.
answer that. I'm sorry.
no, that's all
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I might just comment from a property perspective, as that sits in my portfolio. One of the things we're experiencing with the use of our ovals is we are finding that our user groups are increasing, particularly the football clubs. There's 3 of them that operate within Mansfield particularly. The use of our ovals is increasing and the pressure to provide a space for them. And we are finding more conflicts or more finding it harder to manage the ability to give everybody what they need all the time. So they're having, at this point, we're having to provide for compromises between different clubs, and that is probably not an ideal situation when you want to try and increase participation.
Just
Yeah.
Just another question. You highlighted the opportunities, and in the report, it's got obviously Mansfield mentions the Mansfield Racecourse, the showgrounds, and College Park. So, how far are we in terms of going down that road of, say, the racecourse and the showgrounds as prospective future playing fields for sport?
I think I'll defer to the CEO.
Yeah, I'm happy to take that one through you, Miss Mayor. We have actually started going down that path. We've had an initial meeting with the showgrounds, but it doesn't look viable there because of the use of the field for horse activities. It would make it very difficult to be able to change over that and the clashing uses in terms of the times of year. So that, even though it was in the strategy as an opportunity to be explored, we have already progressed that. There certainly is opportunity for us to work with the showgrounds on other sporting uses, such as potentially looking at a upgrade to a pavilion or something that might be used for indoor activities. So, and they're certainly keen for that to happen. So that's something we'll look at exploring. We are also reaching out in relation to the racecourse and to see what opportunities could be explored there. We haven't actually met with them yet, but that will be explored. And we have also arranged a meeting with AFL. Understand there's some support available for us to do some planning and strategic planning. So we've arranged a time to meet with their officers. I went to the Northeast Border Regional launch of their facility strategy last week or the week before. And they're very keen to work with us and see what, because they understand that the growth in regional areas is really starting to put pressure on existing facilities, and particularly with the growth of women's football. So we will report back.
I noticed one of the submissions talked about the Swanpool Oval too. Is a joint use perhaps between Benalla and Mansfield Shire? And given that Mansfield and Benalla do play a lot of sport against each other, it could seem like a quite a viable option. Has that been looked at all?
Not to my knowledge.
Not as yet.
Yeah, so that we'll add that one to the list.
Yeah. And just I noticed half the submissions, or nearly half the submissions, talked about an indoor aquatic centre. Can you just explain? I noticed in the motion that there's been a group set up to have dialogue with Yatham or with. Can you just describe how that'll work?
Well, there was an initial meeting that was held with Yatham, and that was one of the outcomes of that meeting, was to set up a working group, really to look at what our current facilities are and how we can use those to the best benefit, and also looking at the future for the possibility of future funding grants and things that we could pursue.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know whether the CEO wanted to add anything to that, or think no, that's covered.
That's good. Thanks.
No worries. Any other questions, councillors? In that case, is councillor Holcomb.
Recommendation is that council, point one, notes the community feedback received. Point two, adopts the Mansfield Shire Sports Facilities Strategy 2018-28, 2024 strategy update. Point three, endorses the establishment of a sport and rec reference group to collaborate with council and help guide the implementation of the strategy's recommendations. And point four, endorses establishment of the aquatic facility project working group to progress improvements to the usability and accessibility of the current aquatic facility and work towards long-term goal of establishing a year-round aquatic facility for Mansfield Shire.
Thanks. And a second, you had your hand up, councillor Ian. Does anyone want to speak to that motion? Does anyone want to speak against the motion?
I'll speak to the motion. I think,
For it?
yeah,
Yeah, okay.
yeah, I reckon I would.
Yeah.
So I seconded it. And I think it's really a good time to be doing this and looking at it, and because we've seen this extraordinary growth over the last 3 or 4 years, much more than anyone sort of envisaged, and we're a very active sporting town. Mansfield always punches well above its weight in terms of its participation, so we need to be looking at these opportunities. I think particularly the race course has been sitting there for quite a while, and it's a great opportunity. There's been talk, but nothing's actually come about. So it'd be really good to see hopefully some progression down that track in the future. And yeah,
Good, yeah. Where do I get to? Anyone else want to speak to the motion? Or against the motion? I'll put the motion to a vote. All those in favour of the motion? That motion is carried. And thanks, Ms. Bales. Are you going to stay on?
I've got another one.
Alison coming in? No,
No.
you're going to do that? Yeah, okay. 13.4.2 is the Social Inclusion Action Group funding outcomes rounds 1 and 2. Responsible officer is normally Alison O'Keefe, but Ms. Bales. Let's come in. Councillors, any questions? Councillor,
I suppose it's similar to the last question with regard to the sport. It looks like there was a lot of applications for this. Did that surprise you in terms of, because it's really diverse?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think I forgot that last time, so I'm sorry.
No, that's fine.
It was a fantastic response. So the community was the community groups. There was 23 in total applicants, varied groups with fantastic ideas about how to address loneliness and isolation. And I think it's a fantastic endorsement of this grassroots initiative by the Department of Health, because there is groups out there who have great ideas and they just need a little bit of help to put something into practice. And so we were pleasantly surprised at how many, but not shocked.
Yeah,
if
right.
That's a good answer.
That's great. Yeah, it's great diversity, I thought. Yeah, top groups.
I'd like to say something. I don't have a question, but I obviously attended the day, and I was surprised how many people were there. This when the grants were being announced, and I got to ride in the rickshaw. I can't remember what that's called. No,
It's
that's
cycling
not called a
with
junket.
Cycling with age.
Cycling with age. Yeah,
Without
which was-
age.
Without age.
Without age.
Thank
And they were
you.
one of the recipients of the
With age.
funding,
Terrific.
and well done to your team,
Mm.
and especially Alison and the other person that Sally.
Mm.
Yeah, really good outcome.
Mm.
Yeah.
And the group, I'll just if I can add, just hats off to the Social Inclusion Action Group.
Yeah.
They've worked so hard with the support of Alison and Sally, but they've really taken on that responsibility and been so diligent and really kept the goal and criteria in mind with all of their decisions. So just wanted to say a big thank you to them.
Yeah. Yeah, councillor.
So what, after this, where do we go with SIAG now? Is it a year by year proposal, or what's the future now? Is this round going to come up again in another 12 months? Is that how it works?
So it's an ongoing program. There's initiative funding each year. I think one of the parts of the evaluation of this rounds 1 and 2 will be looking at the processes and the outcomes, but also the evaluation of the successful programs this year. We would be trying to identify if some could be perhaps rolled out across other areas. And so it may be the same or maybe a little bit more targeted, but that will all be done through the group and with consultation. And obviously when there's new opportunities for initiative funding, it'll be advertised broadly through community groups.
Good.
Councillors, any more questions? In that case,
Page 44.
44. I've lost my spot. There we go. Thanks, councillor.
Holcomb.
Yeah, are you moving that motion?
I can do.
Yeah, okay.
The council notes the outcome of the Social Inclusion Action Group initiatives funding 23-24 rounds 1 and 2, including the award of $49,061.98 in total funding to 13 successful applicants.
Thanks. Seconded to the motion, please. Roland Webb, councillor Webb. Does anyone want to speak to the motion?
Just very briefly.
Yep.
Well done, Nola, and to Alison, Alison O'Keefe, in terms of pulling that together. As I said, it's just such a great diversity, and as the council team alluded to earlier, it shows that it really has struck a chord in our communities. So, so well done.
Thank you.
Anyone else want to speak to the motion? Councillor Webb.
Just to say that to mirror Councillor Holcomb's comments, but also to say that it's interesting to see the amount of uptake in this particular funding stream and the push behind mental health and how important it's becoming, not only in our community, but communities in general. So I think it'd be interesting to see how we use this information going forward. I'll be interested to see if we can use this for more council grants moving forward as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to say that I was very grateful from the group through Alison to explain how they made their decisions, and it was totally logical to me how they made their decisions, and they just stuck by. It's all about their social inclusion and mental health. So once that it was explained to me, and I'm a bit slow, so thanks very much for that, and it's a great outcome, a very, very good outcome. So happy. So anyone want to speak against the motion? Or all right, I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour of the motion? Motion is carried.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's now. 13.5.1 is the Mansfield Shire Audit and Risk Committee Chair's report to the council, and the responsible officers, our CEO, Ms. Kirsten Alexander. The purpose of this is to present council with an overview of the activities, findings and recommendations of the Mansfield Shire Audit and Risk Committee for the financial year ending the 30th of June 2024. Any questions, councillors? take that report as read.
Yep.
Yep, Mark. You proposing your motion?
Yeah, ready to go?
Yeah, I'm
Sorry.
happy to read it out.
Oh, okay. That council receiving the Mansfield Shire Audit and Risk Committee report for the 12 months ended 30th of June 2024.
Thank you, and I saw Councillor Tean had his hand up, so. Seconder, you want to speak to the motion?
Yeah, just there's a lot of work that goes into the audit and risk committee in terms of the work that's done by the executive and the team, various teams in council that get involved. I find it astounding the volume of work that has to be done and the detail. It's hard enough reading it, never mind having to do it all. Just pulling that whole report together, and we're very. Having said all that, it's a really important committee, and I think it's a pretty good committee that we've got, and on this council have had for the last 4 years. But it requires a lot of work for the executive and even for the if a councillor is going to do the job properly on it, it requires a fair bit of work as well. So I'll just say that. Well done.
Anyone else want to speak to the motion? I'll say a couple of words because I'd like to thank Councillor Holcomb, who's been on this committee for 4 years. And I was only appointed to the committee when I became mayor in last November, and I could not believe the volume of reading. And Councillor Holcomb, you've been all over it, and you've assisted. You've mentored me through that. So personally, thank you very much. And thanks. It's a lot of work, and I really do appreciate the amount you've done because, as you said, it's a very, very important committee. It provides council with certainty that we're being totally transparent and working to the governance rules. So thanks very much. So I'll put that motion, unless anyone wants to speak against it, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that motion is carried. Thank you. Item 13.5.2, the independent audit member recommendation. The responsible officer is Governance and Risk Officer Chelsea Young, and the purpose of this item is to seek council endorsement for the nomination of Mr. Peter Johnson for a 3-year term as the independent audit and risk committee member. Has anybody got any questions? In that case, there's a recommendation. Councillor Holcomb.
Yeah, the recommendation is the council appoints Mr. Peter Johnson to the Mansfield Shire Council Audit and Risk Committee for a third 3-year term commencing 13th of November 2024.
Thank you. Have I got a seconder? Councillor Tean. Does anyone want to speak to that?
Yeah, I'll speak very briefly to it. I'm really pleased that he is standing again for appointment. It's his third term, and as you said earlier, it's a lot of work, and I think as a councillor, it's particularly comforting to have someone like him who's been there. He understands what it's all about, so it's good continuity. He's very balanced, Peter, in how he approaches stuff. He's got great experience, and he chairs the meeting, I think, pretty well in terms of getting through this volume of work. So I think the third term is as much as you can have. So this is his last term. So I think from the council's perspective, you should all be very pleased that Peter has agreed to take on the job.
Yeah. Anyone else want to speak to the motion? Anyone want to speak against the motion? I'll put that motion to a vote. All those in favour of the motion? Motion is carried. Item 13.5.3, that's the Tongarong Land and Waters Council Local Government Forum. The responsible officer is our CEO, Ms. Kirsten Alexander, and the purpose of this agenda item is the report is to seek authorisation from council for Mansfield Shire to actively participate in the Taungurung Land and Waters Council Local Government Forum. So, councillor, have you got any questions about this agenda item? Yeah, councillor.
Yeah, I haven't got a question, but I just, it's not necessarily totally in line with what this document's about, but it sort of is, and it's to do with an article that appeared in the Courier. I was away and missed the last meeting, so you'll have to forgive me for that. But as soon as I got back, I saw the Courier, and there's an article there about the acknowledgement policy dividing council, and it quotes Councillor Sladden in there, but and he said that Taungurung did not agree with the wording that is included in the Welcome to Country policy. The wording that Taungurung put forward has been ignored, and that is not what I believe that council in 2024 should be doing. That's, I wasn't at the meeting, so I don't know what discussion, but the fact that it's made a paper is a really, I think, a really bad look based on how I interpret what that Taungurung we went through with the discussion with Taungurung.
Mr. Mayor, what relevance does this have to this particular agenda item?
Sorry?
What relevance does this have to this agenda item?
It's to do with the Taungurung and discussion with the Taungurung.
It's to do with the Taungurung Local Government Forum.
Sorry?
It's to do with the Taungurung Local Government Forum, this agenda
Which
item?
is all about communication and working with the Taungurung.
So I'm just waiting for councillor Holcomb's question, councillor Webb, which I think is coming.
Yeah.
Is it?
So I just wanted to understand, what are we, is that correct, what councillor is saying? Because that's not certainly how I interpreted the documentation, and admittedly, I just read it when I was on holiday. So, and what are we doing about a response to that? So it's a question to the CEO. Is it correct of what he's saying? Because that's the first point.
In relation to the whether or not council consulted with the Taungurung, we absolutely did, and we incorporated their comments into the revised acknowledgement of country or acknowledgement of traditional custodians policy. And in regards to response, we did provide some clarification to the Courier in relation to that to confirm that the Taungurung's feedback was incorporated into our revised policy before we went for broader engagement. Unfortunately, it doesn't appear that response was included in the article, from what I could see. So just to confirm, yes, we did incorporate their comments into the policy that went to community engagement.
So the councillor Sladen's comments are incorrect.
Mr. Mayor, I need to call a point of order here. This is completely off topic and not the appropriate to.
I disagree, councillor Webb.
It's
The
nothing to do with the
CEO and
local
I,
government, Mr. Mayor, this is completely out of line.
the CEO and I think we're councillor Webb.
Sorry, excuse me, Ms. Mayor, you need to rule on the point of order. Councillor Webb has called a
Sorry,
point of order.
all right, you're
Yeah.
calling a point of order, councillor Webb. I haven't got my governance rules in front of me. Can you direct me to the point of order?
That's completely
governance
irrelevant.
rules.
It's
No, I
completely
need a number.
I don't
You've
have
got to give me the number. Like, is it 16.2? Where is it?
Mr. Mayor, this discussion is completely irrelevant to the topic at hand, and I'd like to get back onto the agenda, please.
The item very confused. The topic at hand is entering into an agreement with the Taungurung about communication, basically, and an understanding with them. And clearly, there's been no understanding with them, according to Councillor Sladen.
So I'll just put rule on the point of order first to get through the
Right.
governance. It's my belief that a councillor that calls a point of order must indicate to the chair the number of the point of order and where it comes from in the governance rules. So I haven't got my rules with me. I've left them at home, unfortunately, today. But if you can let me know, Councillor Webb, then I can make a ruling. Otherwise, I can't.
I'll have it with you just a moment. Thanks, Mr. Mayor, if you bear with me.
So your comments noted, but I think this is about the way I read it, about our relationship with Taungurong Land and Waters Corporation in going into an agreement with them, and the agreement is part of the relationship. It's the way I'm reading it. Is that the way that you're asking the question?
That's exactly right, because I don't think the relationship, based on that, Taungurong wouldn't think terribly highly of this council at the moment, I would have thought. And I just wanted to, because when I read all those papers, we had consulted with the Taungurong closely with the acknowledgement country. But that's not what he's been quoted. And if that's, council's been misrepresented, I believe, and it's in the local paper. So I'm trying to get clarification. It's just about establishing a relationship with Taungurong, which is what this point's all about. This agreement. So where did we discuss this with Taungurong beforehand? And
We did.
we did.
But sorry, if I could just bring us back to the governance rules for a tick.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Mayor, you need to either rule or either accept. You need to rule on the point of order.
I have.
So you're ruling against, because you didn't actually say that. We just need to clarify that for the minutes.
I'm ruling against the point of order because the governance rules are quite clear.
Yep.
That a councillor must tell me what area of the governance rules they are wanting to bring up. Now, that's my recollection of the governance rules. I haven't got them in front of me at the moment.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to rule my point of order in regards to a disorderly meeting because we're discussing things which are not related to the agenda items. Thank you. It's point Division 1268.
Okay. So now that you've mentioned that, I will now rule that you have a point of order.
Thank you.
Right. And we'll move on. So, Councillor Holcomb, your comments have been noted. I will be taking those comments further and getting an answer to your questions.
Thank you.
No worries.
And how are we going to respond to that?
I will. Yep. Thank you very much. As chair, I'll do that. Can you note that, please, Madam CEO? But are you asking the CEO what is our relationship with the Taungurong? Could you answer the question, please?
Yes, in relation to our relationship with the Taungurong, I believe that we have a good relationship with them. Certainly from the preliminary meetings that we attended with that we were invited to attend to find out more about the proposed forum. It was a very positive meeting, and yeah, there was certainly nothing raised in that forum in relation to concerns over the acknowledgement. Yep.
Any other questions? Councillor Taylor.
Yep, I do. Just, Madam CEO, if you could just give us a brief outline for the benefit of the general public on what this local government forum entails, what benefits you see that we will ascertain being part of this very large group of councils, and what financial costs potentially we could incur from being a member of this group.
I think through you, Mr. Mayor, it primarily does come back to building that relationship. There are, I think, benefits for both parties in doing that, in and in building a stronger relationship, working together, achieving, I guess, a collective approach to how we do undertake our responsibilities under the various acts, and all of those are listed in the report. Both parties have responsibilities. Both parties are required to consult and engage with one another. This forum provides an opportunity both for the Taungurong, in that they are engaging with multiple local governments in often over the same things, but it also provides an opportunity for local governments themselves, who are all facing challenges in actually, I guess, how the actual legislation hits the ground. So how we actually can work through the processes for cultural heritage management. That was one of the priorities, I think, that has been identified as how there's an opportunity for us to work together with local governments, with the Taungurong, and with state government representatives involved, in order to reach a better understanding of those processes, but also potentially to influence change where that's needed. So I think there is a real opportunity. In terms of the potential costs, we don't yet know what they will be. One of the requests as part of the forum is to participate in a working group to explore that. The Taungurong have certainly made the point that because of the engagement they're required to do, that does have a cost imposition on them in terms of resource time, as it does for us too. It's all a result of the state legislation, and they do want to work with us and the state to look at whether we can come up with a collaborative way to fund some officers, rather than each council individually having to put resource time to it. So the cost that the initial cost that was proposed was for a collective contribution was 500,000, but that is up for discussion. So it will be, if we choose to join the forum, it will be explored with Mansfield Shire and all of the other 14 or 15 in total local governments that are proposed, plus also with the state government too, because the state government also have responsibilities as landowners and managers.
Okay, so from what you're saying is, and what I read in the recommendation is that for any ratepay money to be put into this group, that will have to come back to council, to a meeting,
Exactly.
and pass a resolution.
Exactly. And we would also, through you, Mr. Mayor, we'd also include that in our budget processes too, as we would for any other new initiative that would go out for consultation as part of that budget process.
Right. So what can you give me a little bit of a guide as to what we would currently spend in our dealings with Taungurong as a whole?
Through you, Mr. Mayor,
I know they come here to speak to us in a meeting, but do we, what costs are imposed on us?
It's
currently
for Mansfield Shire, it's currently not substantial. I think we've been very lucky. We've had two local representatives, being Auntie Angela and Auntie Bernie, who have been very generous with their time in terms of attending council meetings and working with us, in particular on the museum project. Hours and hours of their work, and it's been totally voluntary. So from Mansfield Shire's perspective, we haven't actually really spent much at all. But I understand from other local governments, from talking to them at the forum, that in some cases, over a number of years, they've spent up to 60,000. So that's some of our neighbouring shires. On working on various projects and initiatives with the Taungurong. So it just depends, I think, what you're involved in and what you've invited them to take part in. But I guess from their perspective, there is a cost involved with their time, where it starts to involve officers from the Taungurung Lands and Waters Council. Those officers are paid positions, and they are looking for a fair and reasonable contribution. Yes.
Thanks. Thanks for that.
Other questions, councillors? At the moment, Madam CEO, do you understand, or you can give us an idea of how this came about, why they want these 3 positions, and is the Victorian state government funding any of these positions now or in the future?
Yep, through you, Ms. Mayor, it is the state government is funding an engagement officer, but that is only for 12 months. It's only a 12-month commitment. So they've funded 1 officer. The Taungurung have identified, given the volume of engagement that's happening and is required to happen to fulfil obligations under the Act, they've identified a need for more than that, and that's what they want to explore with local government and with the state. Because, yeah, it is starting to really impact on their time.
Yeah. And that's funded for 12 months, I believe.
12 months only.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And has the state government indicated whether they'll continue funding that 1 position?
They haven't committed to it as yet. There was certainly a willingness to contribute to the ongoing discussions, and and to obviously take back anything that, as we would bring back to council, any requests for a continuing commitment.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Councillors, any more questions on this agenda item? In that case, the recommendation, Councillor Holcomb.
The council, point 1 notes the terms of reference for the Taungurung Local Government Forum. 2 agrees to become a member of the forum and nominates the mayor and CEO as council's representatives. 3 actively participates by ensuring representatives attend regular meetings held by the forum. And 4 considers at a future council meeting a recommendation relating to any proposed financial commitment in support of the forum objective which exceeds that which is required to meet council's statutory obligations.
Thank you. We've got a seconder to the motion. Councillor Webb. You want to speak to the motion, Councillor Holcomb?
Yeah, no, I see no downside for us as a council being on it. And I note the support that the local Taungurung people have given us in certain areas, and as per what the CEO just said. So, and yeah, as I said, there's no downside for us, and hopefully something comes of it for both parties.
Yep. Anyone else want to speak to the motion? Councillor Teen.
Yeah, I'd just like to make a comment that you can. It's noted in the report that you may cancel membership at any time in writing to the co-chairs, so you're not bound by this membership, and that there will be no financial impost on the Shire at this stage, and until such a motion comes back to council otherwise. So I think we've got as the CEO mentioned, a very good relationship with the Taungurung here at the moment, and it concerns me slightly that we would be lumped into a very big group of shires, 5 of them metropolitan shires, which have vast amounts of money, and already probably have consultants from their relevant Aboriginal land councils. So a shire like Mansfield perhaps doesn't have the need and the ability to pay for that. So it's worth noting.
Thanks, Councillor Teen. Anyone else want to speak to the motion? I'll just say that the CEO and I have been engaged very heavily over the last 8 months, Taungurung on this issue. And we've done a lot of miles. And noting that they do want to meet every 6 months. Last time we went, we both took my car and went over to Bendigo, which was basically the whole day. So there's a lot of work to be done, but the relationship that I have experienced with their CEO and their chair is a very happy and trustworthy relationship. I don't see any other way to describe that. So, all right, anyone want to speak against the motion? In that case, I'll put this motion to a vote. All those in favour of the motion? And that motion is carried. Item 14, council meeting resolution action stage status register. Any questions, councillor Webb?
Just to move the motion, thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Sorry, is there a question? You're moving it.
Just moving it, thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, right, okay. Any
Councillor
question?
any questions?
No, all right.
No, can you speak up a bit, councillor Webb? It's just a bit, yeah. Thanks.
All right, councillor Webb's moved the motion.
The council receive and note the Mansfield Shire Council meeting resolutions action status register at 9th of September 2024.
Thank you. Seconder? Councillor. Again, Holton. It's been a long day. Anyone want to speak to that motion? Against the motion? I'll put the motion to a vote. All those in favour of the motion? That motion is carried. Item 15, the Audit and Risk Committee meeting agenda and minutes. Councillor Holcomb.
The council received the agenda minutes of the Mansfield Shire Audit and Risk Committee meeting held 26th of August 2024.
Thank you. Seconder, councillor Tehan. Anyone want to speak to the motion? Against the motion? I'll put that motion to a vote. All those in favour of that motion? Motion is carried. The authorisation sealing as documents is nil. Closure of the meeting to the members of public. Motion, James.
The council closed the meeting to members of the public under section 66(2)(a) of the Local Government Act 2020 to consider confidential reports in accordance with section 66(2) of the Local Government Act 2020 for reasons set out in section 18 below.
Thank you. Seconded the motion. Councillor Holton. All those in favour of that motion? Motion is carried. So we'll be back after we discuss this confidential report. Thanks for waiting, members of the community, maybe still watching us now. We've just received the report from the CEO 12 months performance review. I'd like to say thanks for watching our council meeting today, being held at a reasonable hour in the day. And I'd like to wish all my councillors and council officers a safe journey home and a good rest of the day. So thanks very much.